Oh,
Good morning.
good morning.
Welcome to a new day on Focus on Liberia, where we discuss gender equality or gender justice in our societies. Our conversations cover gender based violence, identifying root causes, and seeking ways to address those and related issues by harnessing healthy and generally acceptable traditional values, systems, and practices, healthy religious values and practices, as well as practical global values and systems for women and girls' equal rights. I'm going to begin by sharing with us a few stats from the national statistics. Um, and I'm going to share the link above this video at the end of the presentation. On average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men. Now, all of this, 1 in 4 women experience severe intimate partner physical violence, intimate partner sexual violence, and or intimate partner stalking with impacts such as injury, fearfulness, post-traumatic stress disorder, use of victim services, contraction of sexually transmitted diseases, etc. 1 in 3 women has experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. This includes a range of behaviors, for example, slapping, shoving, pushing, and in some cases might not be considered domestic violence. 1 in 7 women have been injured by an intimate partner. 1 in 10 women have been raped by an intimate partner. 1 in 4 women have been a victim of severe physical violence. For example, beating, burning, strangling by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 1 in 7 women have been stalked by an intimate partner during their lifetime to the point in which they felt very fearful for or believed that they or someone close to them will be harmed or killed.
Hmm.
On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. The presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of women being killed 5,000%. We talked about that the other time when we're talking about gun violence in previous presentation. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime. Women between the ages of 18 to 24 are most commonly abused by an intimate partner. 19% of domestic violence involves a weapon. Domestic victimization is correlated with a higher rate of depression and suicidal behavior. Only 34% of people who are injured by intimate partners receive medical care for their injuries. Now let's come to rape. 1 in 5 women and 1 in 71 men in the United States have been raped in their lifetime. I need you to pay attention to the gap, to the difference in the rate. 1 in 5 women to 1 in 71 men in the United States have been raped in their lifetime. Almost half of female, 46.7% victims of rape in the United States were raped by acquaintance of these. 45.4% of female rape victims were raped by an intimate partner. Stalking. 19.3 million women in the United States have been stalked in their lifetime. 60.8% of female stalking victims reported being stalked by a current or former intimate partner. Homicide or femicide. 72% of all murder suicides involve an intimate partner. So this is, the conditioning that women are property of this guy. So if I can have her, she cannot leave. He kills her, but then to avoid facing the consequence of his action, he takes his own life. So 72% of all murder suicides involve an intimate partner. 94% of the victims of this kind of murder suicide are female. 94% of the victims are females. Children in domestic violence. 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year. And 90% of these children are eyewitnesses to this violence. The economic impact of domestic violence or domestic abuse. Victims of intimate partner violence lost a total of 8.0 million days of pay work each year. The cost of intimate partner violence exceeds 8.3 billion per year. Between 21 to 60% of victims of intimate partner violence lost their jobs due to reasons stemming from the abuse. Between between 2003 to 2008, 142 women were murdered in their workplace by their abuser. Recently, we saw the case of the lady who early in the morning, entering her workplace, the soon to be ex-husband, who was supposed to be a pastor, shot her red and killed her. So even though I'm reading stats, but I need us to humanize these stats, because when we bring human beings, it sounds like these are isolated cases. So I decided for us to start with the stats, but they are actual human beings. And we're going to listen to, we saw a few clips of some of the human beings behind the stats, and we're going to be listening to a live one. So I'm going to continue and then and then call in our guest for the day. So only 8% of women killed in a workplace during this time frame. Physical and mental impact. Women abused by their intimate partners are more vulnerable to contracting HIV or other STIs due to forced intercourse or prolonged exposure to stress. Studies suggest that there is a relationship between intimate partner violence and depression and suicidal behavior. Physical, mental, and sexual and reproductive health effects have been linked with intimate partner violence, including adolescent pregnancy, unintended pregnancy in general. We read, some of all who read the story of our laureate, um, Nobel Peace Laureate Lema Bowie, you will read where she shared about, not doing, practicing safe sex, living in a domestic violent relationship, and just finding herself pregnant because, you know, the man sleeps with you without your consent. He's not the one whose body is being repeatedly have to go through childbearing. So this leads to unintended pregnancy in general, miscarriage, stillbirth, intrauterine hemorrhage, nutritional deficiency, abdominal pain, and other gastrointestinal problems, neurological disorders, chronic pain, disability, anxiety, um, PTSD, as well as non communicable diseases such as hypertension, cancer, and cardiovascular diseases. Victims of domestic violence are also at higher risks for developing addictions to alcohol, tobacco, or drugs. Welcome to a new day today, audience out there. On a new day today, we have Miss Shalisa Wall, the author of the book titled It's Time to Go. Um, How to Safely Leave an Abusive Relationship. She will be sharing lessons and resources from her book and talking to us about discovering your strengths, self love, and your path to recovery. Shalisa was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and recently moved to sunny Arizona. She holds a bachelor's degree in administration of justice from the University of Pittsburgh and has an associate's degree in corrections administration from Community College of I'm not sure how to say that. She will correct me when she come on. Shalisa is a veteran of both the Army and Navy Reserves with an honorable discharge from both branches. For over 20 years, she served as a social service worker to help people rebuild their lives after tragedies. She is a proud mother of two grandkids to and a grandmother to two beautiful granddaughters. She's a proud mother of two great kids, I'm sorry, and a grandmother to two beautiful daughters. She believes she answered her calling to write books to improve the quality of life for battered women. As a survivor of domestic violence and rape, Shalisa shares her testimony to encourage and restore hope to women. And as a Christian, her faith and prayer are vital. She loves to laugh. I know that for a fact. And when she's not writing, you can find Shalisa spending time with her family and friends, traveling, eating great cuisine, and making new connections with people. That is true. It's an honor to have this brilliant author of this book that we're going to, very resourceful. This conversation promises to be illuminating. I ask you to stay with us as we listen to Shalisa. Welcome, Shalisa, on a new day.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so proud and honored to be here. Thank you for allowing me to come and share my testimony, Priscilla.
Sure, sure, of course. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And I read your book. I'm going to share the link of the book so that you can check it out. Like I said, it's a great resource. But yeah, so I read your book and it was like, I don't want to give away a lot in the book. Um, but I was really, really blessed by the richness of this book. So first I want to start by you defining domestic violence for us. What is domestic violence?
So, domestic violence comes in many forms. It can, first and foremost, it is violence in an intimate partner relationship. And one partner holds more power and control over their partner. In that relationship, the abuser can do physical violence, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional and psychological. And I would say over the last 10 years, it's also cultural because the abuser can stop their partner from participating in religious and cultural customs.
Okay. Okay, so who can be a victim of domestic violence or abuse?
Anyone, anyone. So domestic violence doesn't discriminate against anyone. And so you could be male, you could be female, you can identify as other genders. Anyone that is rich, that is poor, that is short, that is tall, It doesn't matter what background you come from. You can be affluent, you could be educated, you could be a high school graduate or have a GED or a dropout. Domestic violence doesn't discriminate against anyone. Anyone can be an abuser and anyone can be impacted as a victim of domestic violence.
Wow.
Yes.
So, according to your biography, you believe you answer your calling to write books to improve the quality of life for battered women. How so? Please explain to us, well, how did you
Sure.
come about that?
Sure. Thank you for asking. So, first and foremost, my background, as you read a little bit about my biography, I have an associate's degree from Community College of Allegheny County.
Thank
That's in
you.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. You're welcome. And then my bachelor's degree is in administration of justice
Okay.
from the University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I really believe that that's what God called me to this earth to do, was help people that are hurting, right? So, from that calling of helping people that were hurting and helping them rebuild their lives after tragedies, that led me into my other calling, which I really believe is my true calling, and that is to minister to women that are impacted by domestic violence. As you mentioned before, I too am a survivor of domestic violence, and who better can help another woman come out of that situation than me? Because I went through it, I walked through it. And even though everyone's domestic violence abuse is different, there are some patterns, there are some similarities in each relationship. And I guarantee you, if you lined up 100 women or you put them in a room together and you allow them to talk about what they experience in their domestic violence relationship, there are some similarities there, which could be verbal abuse. So my abuser, he always told me who I wasn't. He and I came from different cultures. He's Jamaican. I'm an African American woman born here in the United States. He was born in Jamaica. So there were some real true gender roles that he expected. He expected to be the man and the ruler, so to speak, and he expected me to be quiet and to follow his lead. But again, like I said, if you put those women in a room together and they begin to talk, my story will be similar to your story. The physical violence, the pushing and the slapping. I endured that. I experienced that. I also experienced financial abuse. Both he and I worked full time jobs. We made very good money. But there came a point in my career where I was not only promoted at my job, but I also received a significant pay raise. When I got that pay raise, he forced me to pay all the bills in the household. He was jealous, he was angry, and he even verbalized that. And he said, well, since you make all the money now, you can pay all the bills. And I went along with that. I also experienced sexual violence, and also he withheld affection. So he wasn't very affectionate as far as hugging or kissing. He wasn't. He withheld that on purpose. And no matter what I did to try to win his affections, I couldn't, and he wouldn't give that to me. So the cultural abuse came from the fact that, like I said before, we are both from two different countries, two different cultures. And so I was never readily accepted into his family because I was an American woman, I was a Black woman, and his family wanted him to be with a Jamaican woman. When I tried to cook his native dishes, he always complained. You added too much salt. You didn't do this right. You didn't do that right. And I could never quite meet his needs, never quite meet his goals. He always moved the finish line. He would say, okay, if you get to this point, you and I will be okay in our relationship. And I would get there, and then he would continually move the goal line. So I never quite met his needs. I never quite lived up to his expectations.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry that you had to experience that, go through that. So your experience is is intersectional. So it had to do with control, and then yeah, cultural difference was an issue. Um, but abusers will use whatever tool they're going to use to keep to have control over the victims.
Yes.
So if it wasn't culture, it would have been something else. Cultural difference, it would have been something else. Um, but yeah, that really just gave him a tool. It's sad that he had to weaponize the cultural difference to perpetrate his abuse. But I think it's just an abuse or hiding behind, you know, uh, um, any tool that will come in handy. So you're going to share a little more about that if you want. It is your story, and I'm going to respect how much you wish to share. But you share much more about that in your book. And now, and you said something when you were like, I decided to share that because I want to work with women. I believe I've been called to work alongside women who are going through abuse in their life. And in order to be able to do that, I have to show that, I'm an expert on this because I lived it. I have a lived experience. So I believe that was why you included your story in your book as well. Even as you share with women the tools, the resources. Again, your book is just so impactful. I read your book and it's just so enlightening. So I believe that was the reason why you included your personal story or some part of your personal story into your book, correct?
Yes. So the reason I did that is to show that I started somewhere in life, right? I was born, I had a family, and I wasn't born a domestic violence victim. I just wasn't. And so I included where I started from because there were some men in my life that tremendously impacted my life.
So that
And
was
yes, go.
so that was going to bring me to the next one of the chapters or that you tag. This shouldn't have happened. Um, this shouldn't have happened. So is that where you're going? Like what shouldn't have happened?
What shouldn't have happened is I should not have been abused in my relationship.
Okay.
When I think of a romantic relationship, I think of a couple that are in love. They edify one another. They support one another's individual dreams and experiences and where they want to be in life individually and then collectively as a couple. They number one should serve God, right? He's the head. Then I follow the man because he's following Christ. And if he's following Christ, then I know we're in good hands. Okay. When I think of a romantic relationship, I think of love and support. This is my partner. I talk to my partner and I share intimate things about my life, my experiences, and where I want to go in life. He's my confidant. When he raises his hand, it's to hug me and embrace me, not to slap or hit me, right? So, in a healthy relationship, that's what it's supposed to look like, where we are equal. We're partners in this. We're friends. We love on one another and we support one another through life. We pray with one another. We go to church with one another. Obviously, when I was with my former abuser. I was not a saint. I was not a Christian. I was not walking with Christ. I was having sex outside of marriage. I had a child out of wedlock. I've had two children out of wedlock. So I wasn't saved. I wasn't born again. But once I went through that experience and I went through that part of my life, it brought me to this point. I look back at it and I say, I had to go through that to get to where I am today, to become the woman I was today and I am today. I look back at him and I say, he was broken, I was broken. So we were two broken people trying to be in a whole relationship, and it didn't work. I didn't know who I was as a person. I didn't know who I was as a woman. I thought I was grown. I thought I was mature, but in fact, I was not. I was that broken and abused little girl that endured child abuse, that endured bullying, right? And then he wasn't my first abuser. He was my worst abuser. So when I got into the relationship with him, I wanted him to make up for all the things that I didn't get in life. I wanted love. I wanted unconditional love. And I wanted him to fill all those voids and all those broken places from all the people that didn't give me what I wanted. I wanted him to do that. So I was putting him in the place of God and try to make this mortal man be the one that was my panacea, my answer for everything. And in fact, he wasn't. He couldn't give me what I wanted and needed because number one, I wasn't his place to do. And then number two, he was just as broken as I was.
Okay.
Yes.
So before I came in earlier, I'm sorry, you were going to talk about three men. You started, and now you say he was your worst
Yes.
abuser. But there are three men. Who was the first, and then the second? You want to go into that, or
Sure.
okay?
Yes. So the three men that I believe that had the most profound impact in my life, number one was my father. Okay. And I say that because that's the first man that every woman, every young girl has a first relationship with, right? Your father. He is the man that gave you life. So my father, the relationship with him and my mother started out on a not too good of a note. And what I mean by that is I'm a product of rape. So my father raped my mother, and that's how I became to be. But I'm no accident. Okay. So with him, with my father, he was never around. He was never a part of my life. I only saw my dad one time in my life that I remember. And so his absenteeism left a void. He's the man that should have been the one that said, I love you. That should have been the first man that said, I love you. He should have been the one that protected me. He should have been the one that gave me advice and how to go through this very difficult and hard life. He should have been that one, but he wasn't. And so, because he wasn't there, I was looking for love in all those other men that I dated. I wanted my father in those men, and I didn't get that. I would say the next man that had the most profound impact was my first boyfriend. So when I was 13 years old, I began dating a young man. He was 16 at the time, and he was very popular. In high school, he played football, and so everyone in the community knew him, right? So here he comes to me. You could have picked all these other girls, but you chose me, and I felt privileged and I felt special, because here is this cute boy, high school boy at that, paying attention to a middle schooler. You know, I'm like in eighth grade, and so when he and I began dating, again, I'm still looking, I'm still searching the world, even at 13, for love and affection from a male. And so in that, I became pregnant, as a result of my relationship with him. So now I'm a 13-year-old girl pregnant, and he was not a good person. There were some things that he was going through in his life. And like you said, I don't want to give too much away from the book, but as you read the book, you'll find out what happened in that relationship. It was not healthy. It was not good. At 13 years old, being pregnant by a boy that really honestly shouldn't have been talking to me anyway, because I was so young and so immature. And then I would say the last male that had the most impact in my life was my former abuser. And I have been out of that relationship with him for well over 10 years. But at the time, I was almost 40, almost, and he was 11 years younger than me. At that time, I dated, everybody was 10 or 11 years younger than me, and that was my preference at that time. And so he was, I can say, a boy, and I thought I was a woman, but in fact, I wasn't. So he was the one that I can say that hurt me the most of all the men that I've ever dated. He was the one that tore me down the most verbally, physically, financially. And I didn't even know I was in an abusive relationship. You know, I didn't discover that until I called the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and I began to share with the staff that answered my call what I was experiencing. And she said, "Oh, that's domestic violence." And I said to myself, "Oh, no, not me. Domestic violence is hitting." And at that point, he hadn't hit me at that point. So I said, "Oh, no, no, I'm not experiencing domestic violence." And then she began to say, "Is he extremely jealous?" Yes. "Does he always accuse you of being unfaithful to him?" Yes. "Do you have to remain in constant contact with him when you're not in his presence?" Yes. So she began to go down this checklist, and every single characteristic that she named, I was experiencing it at that time. And I was shocked. And I hung up from the call, enlightened, shocked, appalled, mad, but I still stayed. And that's the sad part.
Yeah. Yeah. Is that where you come in with the part that you talked about, the puppy love
Yes. So the puppy love was
in your book?
what is in my book. Yes. So the puppy love was, when I was with my boyfriend at 13.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
that
Okay.
was the first time that I had been in a relationship with a boy, and I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know about holding hands and hugging and kissing and spending time together. He was my first boyfriend, and I thought I was in love.
Okay. 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 So you mentioned a few, I guess they are the warning signs. So you want to go ahead and tell a little more. What are the warning signs of domestic violence? Just for people who are not going to call the 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 domestic violence hotline in the first place. I don't know why you decided that day to make that call.
Yeah, so I decided to make the call because I thought I was just having some troubles in my relationship. And I thought that we were hitting just a rough patch, because there were times when everything was going along swimmingly and we were getting along, we were laughing just like a normal couple and enjoying one another. We would travel and things would go well. And then there were times in the relationship where I felt like I literally was walking on eggshells, because I didn't know when he was going to get mad at me because I didn't or did something that he didn't like. And I didn't always know what he liked and didn't like. And I felt like I was always trying to figure him out. And so it was a lot of peaks and valleys in the relationship. There were so many ups and downs, and I just was always on edge and uneasy. And I saw a clip one time when I was at work. I was watching a training that I had to go through, and I wanted to go through the training by myself before I presented the training to my staff about domestic violence. And when I saw that training, it was like a light bulb went off, and I said, I wonder if I'm going through this myself. And I said, well, let me call an expert. The
Okay.
National Domestic Violence Hotline is 24/7, 365. It's free, it's confidential, you can remain anonymous. And so I didn't give my name, but I explained what I was experiencing. And the staff that answered my call said, yes. And like I said, when she began running down the list of those type of warning signs to look out for, which the red flags are some of these, not all, but a lot of these are the warning signs. Being very controlling, right? So after I had my daughter, I could not leave the house without her. If I went into the community for anything, whether it was grocery shopping, to go to the mall, wherever I went, I had to take my daughter with me. And when I went out with her, he would still call me. And if I didn't answer his call on that first ring, oh, you must be cheating. So that's a warning sign of you have to be in constant contact with your abuser. Another
Okay.
warning sign is extreme jealousy. Okay. Always accusing and accusatory of you being unfaithful. You know, the way I dress now is the way I dressed when I met him. I always put on makeup and tried to present myself as a lady because that's who I am. You know, my mom, she dressed up and she wore makeup. I learned it from her and I imitated her, even, you know, as a woman. And so I always tried to keep myself looking nice. And so he began saying, oh, well, you must be dressing up because you have a date with your boyfriend. So guess what I stopped doing? I started minimizing my makeup. I started minimizing my hairstyles. I dressed down to appease him. I remember one time we were out in a big box store and we were standing in line. And this man just struck up a conversation with me. And then another lady chimed in and she joined the conversation. I remember him telling me once we got to the car, you're too friendly, you're too social, you're too outgoing. And so I stopped being social and outgoing. That's another warning sign where that person has that type of control over you where you're not yourself. You're not your genuine self. Always wanting to put you in a box and him wanting to control every aspect of your life.
My life. Yeah.
Yes. And I allowed him to. So those are some of the red flags. Obviously, there's many more, and I discussed that in my book. Yes, there are many more, but that's what I endured. That's what so many other women, I'm sure, that are going through domestic violence, they're experiencing some of the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sadly, sabotage or birth control methods or refusal to honor agreed upon methods is common in especially parts of where I come from, Liberia. The man has to agree. In other countries, even here, the man has to agree before uh, the woman can use birth control. Like she doesn't even have control over her own body because this is not the one that gets pregnant. All he does is sleep with a woman, and her body goes through, carrying another human being, and then she has to stay up after she gave birth, and then another 2 year cycle of while her body is trying to recover, because again our world has socialized men to leave parenting to women. So a woman body carries another human being and then give birth. She still doesn't get a rest. She has to deal with and pattern and depression, all of that, and at the same time the shaming of uh being a perfect mother or not getting it right, and then she goes through that cycle of a year or two, and then he starts to sleep with her again with practicing safe sex, and then they go through that and go through that. So uh, um yeah, so it's part of domestic abuse where the men will be like, no, she cannot take birth control because I
Mhm.
want 88 children. He's not the one who's giving birth to them. All he does is just have sex and ejaculate one or twice, and that's his part in the whole child and bearing process. But yeah, so like you said, there are a lot of them. Extremely controlling behavior, verbal abuse, um, force, sex, or disregard of your partner's unwillingness to have sex, um, controls all the finances, abuse of other family members, children, or pets. So Shalisa has a lot of these in her book. Check out the book. Again, I'm going to share the link so that you can check it out for yourself. But there are a lot of warning signs of domestic violence. Shalisa, let's go to where you talk about. So when people say, then why did you stay with him? Especially after, so let's zero in on you. I know generally we ask women that, for those who do not understand the dynamics of domestic violence, the first thing is, why are you staying? So why did you not leave after that first call?
Right. So I stayed for many reasons. I can honestly say that I mentioned earlier, I came from a single parent household. So even though my father created me, he didn't stick around. He married another woman and had another family, and he chose not to be a part of my life. And so when I had my daughter and I was in the relationship with her father, I wanted us to have an intact family. I wanted an intact family. I wanted to be the wife. I wanted him to be the husband. I wanted us to raise our daughter together because I didn't have that growing up. And that's what I truly desired. I didn't want to, I already, my daughter was my second child out of wedlock. Okay. And so I said, this time it's going to be different. I'm going to stay with her father. We are going to be in a healthy, happy relationship. And I was determined that I was going to make that relationship work at all cost. And it cost me a lot. It cost me my dignity. It cost me my health. It cost me financially, emotionally, physically, spiritually. It cost me in that relationship to stay in it. But I was determined because number one, I was so in love with that man. I loved him far, far more than myself. I really, really did. And I tried to pour out and pour into him to show him how much he meant to me. And so I stayed because I wanted us to build a life of wealth together so that we could leave a legacy for our daughter. And I said, if I do this, and if I keep showing him how much he means to me and how much I love him, he'll stay. And so I dealt with the abuse, I dealt with the control because I wanted her to not go through the same thing I went through, which was being raised in a single parent household. Right. So I didn't want that generational curse to continue because my mom was raised by a single mom. My mother's mother was raised by a single mom. So you see, there was a pattern. And I said, I'm going to break that pattern. I'm going to be the one to marry my child's father and us to stay together. Okay. So I stayed because I loved him. I stayed because I wanted that intact family. And I didn't want to keep having children out of wedlock by all these different men because my daughter and my son have different fathers. And I said, I'm going to stop it right now. So I
Even
stayed.
if it kills me.
Yes, even if it kills me, I was that determined, you know. And sadly, I did die. I died in that relationship physically. I died every time he would push me. I died spiritually because I was not in relationship with my God and my Savior. I died spiritually. I died financially. I died because I was no longer connected to my support circle, my friends and family, because he isolated me. You know, I moved from my hometown in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to Hyattsville, Maryland to be with him. And so I didn't know anybody there but his family. And again, because there was that cultural difference, they weren't that close to me anyway. So I literally had no one. I depended solely on him for everything, and he knew it. Okay. So I stayed because I was determined. This is going to work no matter what. If it kills me, then I'll die for love. And that's insanity. I wasn't in my right mind. Really. I just wasn't. And I never wanted to love anybody like that again because I put everything into him. And again, he wasn't the person or the thing that I should have put all my love into like that anyway. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Let me read some comments because someone just is just asking. And then we will continue. Okay. And just to take time for me to process what you share, what you just did,
Sure.
and I'm sure other people who are watching. So let me read some comments. Someone say, um, River says, Pro say, do you take calls? No, River says, if you have a question, just please write it down. I will read it, or a comment, write it down. I'm going to read it. But yeah, I don't take calls. Uh, he said, oh, wow, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Uh, um, Shalisa, River says, Pro says, sorry to you for what you went through. Um, yeah, so we're talking about domestic violence people, and we have in studio with us Miss Shalisa Ward. Miss Shalisa is the founder of, that is the one that Dennis said he was interested in, Shalisa Cycle. So let's move to it. But before we move to that quickly, let me ask you, um, when you say the part of your book where you tag, if you fail to plan, then you plan to fail, is the exit strategy for leaving an abusive relationship, correct?
Yes, it
Okay,
is.
so
And
tell
so,
us about the exit strategy.
yes, thank you for asking. So I put that in the book because that is the premise of the book. Is I wanted to share my personal story about domestic violence and where I came from and my upbringing, because that played a part in how I became a domestic violence victim and then an ultimate survivor of domestic violence. So I wrote this book because I didn't know how to leave safely, right? There wasn't a book that I felt I could read or pick up and say, "Oh, this is how I do this. This is a step-by-step
Yeah.
plan." Okay? And I say that it is a guide because everyone's domestic violence situation is different. I was in a situation where I had money to leave, right? And I had the means to leave. So once I made that ultimate decision, I began planning in my mind, how can I do this safely? Because it wasn't just me. I had a very young child in tow. My daughter, when I first left, was only 11 months old. Okay. And so I was thinking about her. I left because of her, because number one, my mother, my grandmother, and my great grandmother were all victims of domestic violence. Okay. I didn't want to have my daughter see me be beat, be ridiculed, be hurt. I didn't want her to see that I was paying all the bills. I didn't want her to see that. Okay. So then I had to say, okay, I'm not going to leave for me. I'm going to leave for her. She deserves a better life. She doesn't deserve to be raised in a war zone. She deserves to see a man and a woman love each other and be in a healthy relationship with one another. Once I determined that that wasn't possible with her father, I had to leave. But then I had to plan it. Well, how do I do this? There was no one to show me. There was no one to guide me. And I kept it a secret from my friends and family out of shame that I was being victimized, that I was a domestic violence victim. I didn't want them to know. I was really, truly ashamed. And so I wrote this book as a guide of how to leave, whether you're a single person, whether you have children, if you have pets, because you have to think about them too. Some people live in multi generational households. So you can't just leave by yourself. You have to take everyone
Into
that is
consideration.
valuable and who you have a personal relationship with that you want to keep safe. So I talk about that in the book is how do you leave with just yourself and leave with multiple people safely. And the one thing I have to honestly stress here is that if you can leave with your possessions, your medicine, all your important documents, that's fine. But if you can't, just leave with the clothes on your back. Just go because those things can be replaced. Your life cannot. You get one life and that's it. And you talked about so many women being victimized. Femicide is real. So your partner, we hear stories all the time in the news, or maybe we know someone in our family or a friend or a coworker that has been murdered by their partner. I didn't want to be murdered by my partner. I left the day that my partner said, I will kill you. And he had access to a weapon. So I just quietly said in my mind, okay, you're going to kill me? All right. And he said that because I found out that he was cheating. He was unfaithful to me. And so it didn't make sense to me that he would threaten my life because I found out he was cheating. And so I literally packed me and my daughter's bags and left the household after he left. And I knew he was going to be gone for a while. So I left. Like I said, I had the means to leave. And once I left, I called a domestic violence shelter. So they were my support. They provided transportation for me. And they took me and my daughter in. We were safe. I didn't tell him where I was at. They provided food and clothing and legal counsel. And so in the book, I talk about the many times that I left him and what transpired because it takes a woman on average 7 times of leaving and coming back to that abuser before she finally leaves. That's on average. So imagine, and I was one of those women. It took me 3 times before I actually finally left. And I felt like a yo-yo because he kept wooing me back. He was very persuasive and charming and oh, I'll do this for you and I'll do that. And I promise to be better. And I promise I won't hit you anymore. Or I promise I won't be abusive. Or he just didn't even acknowledge. There were a lot of times he didn't even acknowledge the harm that he was doing, and he pulverized me with his words. You and I talked about how you can recover from a wound of someone punching
Physical.
you. Yeah, the physical abuse, someone punching you, or you having a black eye, or whatever it may be. You can recover from that. But I had
Not a
already.
wounded spirit or a wounded soul.
Yes, and that's what it is. You have a wounded spirit and soul. And I had already been pulverized, you know, from being a child to an adult with words. And he had just ground me down to almost dust with his words. But on the flip side, he was very kind and sweet, and oh, come back, and I'll do this, all these wonderful things, and I'll take you to all these places we talked about. And I always believed that he would change and get better, and he didn't. Sad thing, he didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, according to research reports, um, yeah, a victim or survivor heals from physical um, damage or harm or from domestic violence easily than she can heal from emotional and verbal violence or abuse. Because especially the emotional one, it wound the soul, or it break your spirit, and it
Mhm.
really takes longer to heal from that. um yeah, so you said, so be safe first, be safe first. I want you to be safe. I'm just going to read a few of your tips here, and it just shows, so it just goes to show with the video that we started with. Remember the clip we started with? The girl is in a shelter, and he is still trying to track her down. You
Mhm.
know, and there was a documentary that I really was looking for, that we watched a few years ago when I was doing 2020, when I was doing my domestic violence training. And so he ended up killing this guy. Was he violated the protected what, the restraining order, and then he was sent to prison. When he got out, he was able to track her down. Even though they relocated to another state with the children, he was able to track her down in a particular shelter and kill her one morning at the bus stop while they were getting on the bus. So some of the reasons why shelters like to keep a, keep themselves private or hidden, because of these violent perpetrators who track down the abusers, or I mean the victims. So what I don't what and I'm going to come to that at the end of this program is, you were saying that before we came on, these are the same men who will tell you I love you. This is the same person who will tell you I love you. Like, what is it about in a relationship? A guy saw a woman and said, I like you, or whatever was the process for which they both got into a relationship, but it was mutual. And now, it no longer exists. Why can't the other person be allowed, be free to walk out? Like, what is it that you'll be hunting down another human being and say, if you can't stay here, then I'm going to harm you? No, we're going to close with that. But you said, to ensure everyone's safety, please refrain from telling your partner in advance that you are leaving,
Mhm.
because safety is first. Whoever is important to you, take them with you when you leave. Children, pets, because you may not have a chance to safely return to retrieve them. And when I mentioned the case of the girl who the pastor killed, now he's in prison, or husband, um it was because she went back with her brothers to retrieve her stuff, and then a
Mhm.
fight started between one of the brothers and the husband. And the husband said, I'm going to kill her. And then he goes to her workplace a few days later and shot her right there in the morning. Yeah, right in this. I think it happened a year or two ago. It was a Ghanaian pastor. So yeah, so you said that you said you may not have the chance to retreat to return to safely retrieve those things. So make sure you get your stuff. Um, and then number two, you say you would need support from a trusted friend, family members, boss, or others in your support circle a circle to assist with your safe transition. But here's the thing we do, where I come from, or we used to, I don't know whether now, but we used to, where we will return the woman. You know, woman leave a relationship because something was wrong, but then
Mm-hmm.
our society will pressure the woman, return either her parents will
Mm-hmm.
return her, or family members or the church will insist that she has to go back to her abuser.
Yes.
And yeah, the same thing happened when we were kids. My mother, I still remember as a little girl, I remember my mother really weeping, really crying. She didn't want to return. We had left home one time. She took us away and left the house because my father was really violently abusive,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah. So I as a kid, I was rejoicing. We gone to my uncle place and like, oh, we will be leaving to this place, and I'll be getting car to go to school, and then they had to return us home. But I remember my mother weeping. So we do this thing, and then the other thing we do as society, we say, oh, that husband and wife matter, or that lovers affairs, and I was talking about that last week in a new day, like the partners that say it's a husband and wife relationship. Stay out of it, because someone shared with me how she intervened in a situation where her cousin was brutalized by the husband, and the
Mm-hmm.
husband called and was abusing this person. Say, well, you have nothing to do with it. Stay out of it. And I'm like, it's husband and wife matter. And I'm like, these are the same people who will write an entire community or village to put money together to marry them. Like, you want to stay together, you get other people involved. But
Mm-hmm.
then when you mistreating one of the other partners, especially the woman, then you say, no, it's no one's business. How is that
Right.
possible? How do you want to reap from the community, but then you don't want the community to hold you accountable or to intervene when you're doing wrong? And it plays out into our larger society. Um, Governments, institutions, they didn't pay much attention to domestic violence issue. They always took it as a man and woman issue
Mm-hmm.
until in recent years when women rights are saying, this is a human right issue. The
Yeah.
state need to protect all of us. How can you watch a man kill a woman and you say that's his woman as though it's a property? A woman is a
Right.
human being and has a right to be safe.
Yes. Yes,
And
I completely agree. Whenever a man and a woman are involved in a romantic relationship, that woman does have a right to be safe in that relationship, just like the man does. Okay. There has to be equal respect and love and protection, right? So the woman is not property. She's not chattel. I don't belong to him just like he doesn't belong to me. We make a mutual decision to be in a relationship together. But as you mentioned earlier, it is domestic violence is a human rights right
mhm,
issue. Whenever a man abuses his woman, I think people do need to get involved and
yeah,
intervene and say, that is wrong. Stop that. Let me help you get some help. You need some support right now because what you're doing is wrong. And then support that woman as she goes through the relationship to try to get that help. That's why I mentioned in my book, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. You have to plan this out to be safe for you. That is the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship for a woman is when she's leaving the abuser. That's why I said don't tell, don't ever tell. You can't tell anybody until you've actually left. Once you leave, that's when you can tell your support circle, yes, I've left that relationship and this is why. Be honest. Tell them why.
yeah. Yeah. Before we came on, you were talking about how um and that's why you hear from women, from survivors, from victims, that I don't want to get him in trouble, that I don't want him to be taken to prison. When you interview, when you work with victims, they're like, I don't want him to be locked up. So women
Mhm.
are saying, that's not what I want. I just want to be safe. I want the society to condition men that they and women are partners, they are equal, that I am not your child. I fell in
Mhm.
love with you because you promised that you would love me, or you started acting sweet when I met you and you enticed me. You weren't going to be my father. Even if my father, you don't have the right to abuse me. So when people be like, but how would she follow a violent man like that? It's like,
Mhm.
hey, no woman just sees a man violent. The man comes the first day and say, I need you to be my woman, to beat you up, to mistreat you, to abuse you. No, men
Mhm.
come acting nice, being sweet, bearing
Mhm.
gifts, it's when you fall in love, and then they start to exhibit what society had taught them, that the woman belonged to you. So you have control over her
Yes.
you know and it plays out in the language. The way we talk about our partners is the way we see them. We don't see them as partner. I remember intervening in a situation where I was at work, and then I got a call to intervene this, and I'm talking to the man, and he said, what did you and I asked, why did you do that? He did something else. He said, because she was misbehaving. And I just found it funny. I did a phone like this, and I like
Mhm.
he just say a full grown woman was
Mhm.
misbehaving,
Yes.
because in his mind that's his child, or she's beneath him, and he has been told he's the head of her. So
Mhm.
yeah, so I'm just going to go through a few of your tips. You say prior to leaving, number three, you say prior to leaving, gather all important documents and items
Mhm.
for yourself and family, your birth certificate, medications, pet records, supplies. Things are important to you, important documents. Um, if you have pets, take them with you because they may hurt or be neglected by the abuser.
Mhm.
Um, if you receive support from a domestic violence shelter, consider going to a shelter outside of your community you previously lived and where he cannot frequent.
Yeah.
Are you okay with sharing with us the last time you left, how you say you left?
Yes. So the last time I left I was actually in Florida. So he and I moved from Maryland to Florida because he had family there, and we were starting a new life. We were trying to get back to when we first met and start fresh and new. So we went to Florida. We're with his family. He came from a very big family. His mom had like 10 siblings. And so we went and stayed with one of his family members. Things were going along well. I thought that we were happy and in a good place and in a new city. It was warm, palm trees, the beach, life was good. So I thought, until I overheard a conversation with him one day, speaking to a young lady that he met in Maryland. And this woman that he met, he ended up having a romantic relationship with her. And he promised me that he would not talk to her anymore. He said, I'll never talk to her again. I'll never have anything to do with her again. But I found out that that was not true. That was the day that he got angry, that I spoke to him about that, and I told him, you broke your promise, you lied to me. And that's when he got angry and threatened to kill me. So that was the day that I said, no more. No more lies, no more abuse, no more. I'm done mentally, I'm done physically, I'm done financially, I'm done with this. This is a mess. It's not working. And that's when I just packed those important documents that we talked about, me and my daughter's birth certificate, our social security cards, medications, clothing, and I quietly left. Okay. Once I got to safety, that's when I called a domestic violence shelter, and they literally came and picked me up where I was at in the community. I didn't know where I was. I'm all the way in Tampa, Florida. I don't know where I'm at. I had to look at the street signs to let the staff know where to come and pick me up from. And so once I made that decision, I had so many thoughts and feelings swirling around in my mind. I was an emotional wreck. Here, this was the end of my relationship. Okay. So I didn't keep that promise to myself that I would have that intact family for my daughter. And I felt like a failure to her. I felt like I failed myself because I'm breaking up this relationship. Even though I had money, it was savings that I had. So I knew that eventually that money was going to run out unless I got back to work quickly. So I was stressed about money. I was stressed about where we were going to sleep. And even though I knew my daughter and I would be safe at a domestic violence shelter, I didn't know anybody in Florida. So now I'm in a whole nother state again, away from my family and friends. No one still knew in my family what was going
What was
on with
going
me.
on?
Yes, I didn't still didn't tell them. So then I'm worried I don't have my car anymore. I don't I have limited income. I have limited clothes because I only took one suitcase for both me and my daughter when we moved from Maryland to Florida. So then I said, okay, how long can I stay at the shelter? I was a literal wreck. And I remember being in the shelter because the shelter that I temporarily went to in Tampa, they transferred me to a shelter in Miami since he had family in Tampa, Florida. They said, we want to get you out of this city and put you in another city. And they said, we will get you transported to Miami. And I got a plane ticket. My daughter and I ended up in Miami. And I remember one day looking in the mirror while I was at this shelter, and I kept looking for myself. I kept doing one of these, moves like I didn't see me anymore. I didn't see that beautiful woman that had went into that relationship with this person. I was no longer, to me, beautiful. I was broken. I was no longer this outgoing, social, funny, full of life person. The life had been zapped out of me. And then I was angry at him for being unfaithful. I was angry at him for not being the man I wanted him to be. But more importantly, I was angry at myself because I allowed myself to be put into that place of brokenness. And I was angry at myself because I was no longer that woman, that strong woman that I thought I was. And I
Hmm.
said, how did I get here? And as I was crying, I remember I didn't know I was crying. And I touched my face and I said, oh, these are tears. And I remember looking at my hand like, why is my face wet? And I was crying and didn't even know it. And I remember looking in the mirror and I asked God in that moment, please, please heal me from this brokenness. I said, Lord, my light is almost out. I said, but I see a flicker. And that flicker was hope. That's why I share my story. That's why I share my testimony, because I want another woman to have a flicker of hope that if you're in that situation, you can come out on the other side victorious. You can come out on the other side and rebuild your life. That's why I put those steps in there. That's why I put the resources there so that when you leave, you know that there are agencies out there that can help. You know that there are people out there that can help. There are really truly people that care about domestic violence victims beside their family, beside their friends, beside their coworkers. There are professionals that care and that can help guide you through that. And I thank God for those domestic violence shelters that helped me. Like I said, I went through three, And every single one of them, the staff there were so supportive. And I was able to get back and rebuild my life. And it took a long time, but I got there. And so that's why I write this book. So that number one, women can know what domestic violence is. Knowing that definition of it will help you maybe avoid it. And then if you're in it, to help you get out of it quickly. I think the most important thing is that knowing what it is can literally save your life, right? Because the Bible says that my people perish for lack of knowledge. So I want women to be equipped with knowledge, and I want their hope to be restored. When we get together as women that have survived domestic violence and we share our stories and we share our resources, that's what restores hope. That's what saves our lives. And that's what helps keep our families healthy. You know, some women, it's just them, but then others have parents, grandparents, pets, children. We have all these people that we're responsible to, and you can help them get counseling as well. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shalisa. Thank you. Oh, yeah. I wanted to go through the steps, and I'm like, yeah, no, I remember when I was going through my training. Yeah, we're supposed to keep these, in the community, within the circle, so
Mhm.
that, because hey, if you're giving away the steps that a survivor or victim supposed to take to get out, then it's no longer then you expose them to being found out by perpetrators. So I just had to stop myself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can check it out if you're going through something like a few of the information that Shalisa has shared. Please check out her book. I'm going to share the link of the book. I mean, check it out and get yourself educated and informed about the situation. Let me read Abby Taylor's comment contribution. Abby say it's important not to do any search on DV organizations on your computer or phone. He can check your search history. Do it on a library computer or at a trusted friend's place. Yeah, that's true,
Mhm.
Abby. That's true. You tempting me to also even share um the three women I worked with last year. We did similar thing, or get an extra phone. I would just say, yeah, get an extra phone. So yeah, uh, a private phone that one of them kept at a grocery store with with or tell her someone who works at the counter was saving it. So whenever she went to do grocery shopping, she called me from that one, and then we were able to strategize on her exit. So yeah, that's some of the tips. Don't do it at home,
Mhm.
so that he doesn't track you or trace you. It's just sad that you have to go through all of that as a woman. Like, why should someone be praising for getting out of a relationship? How people can say it's by force. Relationship is by force. It's not supposed to be by force. Like, it was something that was happening, or something that was promised, or something that we thought was going to happen, for which we got into it, and now it's not. So why can't a woman be able to just get out? Some of these people carry the impression that they're doing a woman a favor, and so and so. And now I say, I don't want a favor anymore. Let me just go. And now you start haunting me like animal. It's sad. It's sad.
It is. And thank you, Abby, for that tip. Because, and that's one thing I do mention in my book about um, having that phone and computer.
Yeah, the
I
extra.
put some information in there about safety apps that you can download to either your Apple or your Android phone. So there's definitely tips in there. Those are things that I had to think about, when I was leaving. And so these are tips and guides that can help you as you're leaving and to help you plan your exit strategy. And I had to really think about all those things, the social media safety, because we live in this techie world and social media world where we always want to overshare what is going on in our life, right? And we forget that, hey, your location is on. So if your location is on as you're posting, your abuser can see, oh, she's at such and such mall right now. Let me go and find her. So I talk about and provide those sort of tips in my book about social media safety and having those extra phones and having a go bag. So they're definitely there. So again, Priscilla, thank you so
Of
much
course.
for
Yeah,
having
having
me.
a bag packed to a friend's place, yeah, for any day. Yeah,
Mhm.
maybe six months ahead of time or a year ahead of time. Just always leave a dress also at a friend's place and a bag. And yeah. So the last thing, tell us about Shalisa's sisters as we wrap up.
Yes, thank you for asking. So, Shalisa's Sisters is a social group that I started actually last year. And so, my book and starting a social group kind of came out at around the same time, October of 2022. And I started the group because the one thing that I missed the absolute most when I was in my abusive relationship was socializing, okay, with other women, with my friends, with my family. And so when I started the group, I said, well, why would I start the group? What is the purpose of it? And what I thought about was my own experience, and I drew on that experience. And I said, I want to get women together that can meet with one another in a social setting and just laugh and let their hair down, and they know that they're safe. They're no longer in that abusive relationship. The one requirement that I have that I think is the most important is when joining Shalisa Sisters, you absolutely have to be 12 months free of violence in your life. So no longer connected to your abuser in any way, okay? And being safe, all right? When we get together, we go to sporting events, we go to plays and concerts, and we do that just the women by themselves. But then we can also bring our children to some of the events. So twice a month we get together. One event is exclusively for the adult women, and then the second event is for women with their children, and then, or it could be nieces or nephews. But we get together to join for friendship, for resource sharing, for sharing our stories and testimonies,
Yeah.
and for networking, because a lot of women own businesses and maybe they want to share what type of business they operate or products they sell. And that's a way to do it. But again, it's more for socialization. That's the most important thing. And I do have scholarships. So some of the women are sponsored at these events for free. And then others we pay. So it varies, but it's just a social group, and I'm really looking forward to getting together with the women here in Phoenix, Arizona, and participating and in some of these activities together. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
definitely counts me in. Definitely count me in. But yeah, thank you for joining us. For honoring our invite today, and thank you so much for sharing with us. Being vulnerable to the extent you've been. If you have any final parting comments, please feel free to just make your comment right now as we wrap up.
Sure. So I would like to just encourage any woman that has experienced domestic violence to get help, uh, to go to support groups. If you are living in an unsafe um, environment and you want to leave that relationship, contact a domestic violence shelter. They do speak multiple languages, they operate 24/7, 365. If you need resources, they have that, whether it's legal, childcare, clothing, food. That's what they are there for. They are trained professionals. I also provide resources in my book. If you have any questions of me and anything that I talked about today, you can reach me at Shalisa's Sisters at gmail.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn at Shalisa Sisters, and you will personally be contacted by me, whether it's by email or phone call. But I want all of you to know that you deserve love, you deserve dignity, honor, and respect in your relationship. And most importantly, you deserve to be safe. So, thank you for having me here today. And I just wish all of you the absolute best, and God bless you.
Yeah, sure, sure. All right, folks. So we heard Miss Shalisa, and we share a tip or two, two clips. We watched it, and we listened to the stats of domestic violence and domestic abuse, especially when how it affects women. So for me, the root of domestic violence and abuse is the socialization of the patriarchy, which insists that men are head or leaders by virtue of their physical strength and not even anything else, not by intelligence, wisdom, or any earned attribute or virtue. And because religion is a driving vehicle of socialization for the patriarchy, a new day has a Facebook community which is dedicated to teaching about God's will for women and men equality from a Christian worldview and questioning. This is where we go through, questioning the misreading and misinterpretation of God's word and pointing out the differences between traditional gender roles set up by human beings versus God's will, and showing that the patriarchy is not godly. On Noonday also has a private Facebook group of women, just like Shalisa's sister, which where we support each other. For the past 3 years, On New Day has been engaged with providing teaching in our community, supporting women in general who need a safe space to share and network, and working alongside and providing resources for survivors of domestic violence or abuse. So if you need support, please reach out to me for a safe space to share and network. And then last 2 years on New Day John focus on Liberia online media platform to reach a wider audience to discuss gender equality or gender justice in our society, with the hope that these kind of conversations will lead to shift or change in mindset and attitude about the full humanity of human and girls, gender non-binary, gender non-conforming human beings, and lead to a shift in our culture of impunity. Join us. Let's work together towards a mindset of justice and restore the humanity of women, men, gender non-binary, gender non-conforming people. Together we can experience a new day and leave it better for the next generation. It's a new day. Thank you for staying with us all this time. Thank you again, Shalisa. I really, really do appreciate your time with us.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, folks.
Priscilla. God bless you. It was an honor. Thank you so much.
Okay. Goodbye now. We'll talk to you next Sunday, audience. Bye bye.
Bye.
Hi, my name is Addie Tyler from Pennsylvania, and you're watching Focus on Liberia.